Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're just going to give it 1 second for everyone to pop out of the waiting room and into the live event. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith Binder, Chief Marketing Officer at Novata, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar on best practices for accelerating an ESG strategy. ESG has quickly become a strategic necessity for investors in the private markets. More and more firms are seeing that incorporating ESG into investment strategies can be a competitive advantage. And we know that having a strong foundation is the key to success. Today, we're going to dive into some best practices for building that foundation. Our goal is that by the end of this session, you'll have actionable insights that you can apply to build or refine your ESG strategy. But before we get started, I want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be hosted on our website. And we'd love for you to share it with your colleagues and networks. We'll also be taking questions today, so please enter them in the Q&A box on your screen, and I'll do my best to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to your question, please feel free to email us at sales@novata.com, and one of our great customer success reps will get back to you with what you need. Today, I am joined by my colleagues, Jesse Martin, Head of Services at Novata, and Caitlin Pentifallo, Product Lead for Metrics and Guidance at Novata. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and we will start with you, Jesse. So Jesse, please tell us a little bit about yourself and the role you and your team play at Novata.
Thank you, Meredith. My name is Jessie. As she said, I'm based in Boston and I'm our head of services here at Novata. I started in August. Prior to that, I worked as an ESG strategy consultant focused primarily on the private market. So probably no surprise that I ended up here at Novata. I'm an environmental economist by training. Before getting into consulting, I worked in policy. I used to work in natural capital valuation, and my team here works with our clients for, to do all of the things off platform that we know really drive success on platform. We know that technology can't solve every challenge in the complex world of ESG, and we know that we are best positioned to provide those data-driven services, so the pieces of the puzzle that really drive the platform experience with a little bit of that added human touch.
Great, thank you. Caitlin, your turn. Introduce yourself and your role at Novata.
Thanks for that, Meredith. I'm Caitlin, and I lead Novata's metrics and guidance team. So what that means is my team is constantly getting the metrics ready for platform. So whether that's coming from a standard, a framework, or regulation, we're taking all that information and getting it ready so that your data inputs can be well structured to support those needs. And then the guidance that's going to support and guide you every step of the way. My background is quite a varied one. I have a PhD in the efficacies of indicator-based impact assessment. It's weird to say, but metrics are a passion of mine. So it's great that I get to spend every day working on developing frameworks, thinking about it, and putting all these pieces together for our clients. It's something that I'm really passionate about. And glad we get to talk about it today.
You two are such experts. I'm glad to get to work with you. So let's get started. Selecting the right metrics, or as we at Novata like to call them, the metrics that matter, is the foundation of a firm's ESG data strategy. So Caitlin, starting with you, how should investors be thinking about metric selection as they develop their strategy?
Yeah. I'm going to start by stealing a Jesse Martinism, which is begin with the end in mind. And so it's really good guidance because you want to think about, what do you want that report to look like at the end of the day? What do you really want to see reported? And so when you think about that, we don't want to think about that in the short term about just one reporting cycle, but what do you really want that to look like in 5 or 10 years when you're putting that data together longitudinally? And so we're thinking about, what do you want to track? What matters to you? What stage are you in? What are you thinking about from maybe be a voluntary kind of signatory perspective. Are you part of EDCI? Are you part of PRI? Are there regulations that are coming into play, or maybe there's a direction that you're going that we want to help you meet? And so we're really thinking about how we can help you get ready for not just where you are, but also what's to come. And so having that kind of sit down with both of our teams, and sometimes it's Jesse and I together, to think about where are you now, where do you hope to go, is really just going to frame that from that 20,000-foot view in terms of what are those metrics that matter to you right now, and how can we help you get there. So we really want to frame that conversation really truly in terms of what really matters to you, and how can we drive that metrics conversation forward.
That sounds like a great strategy, but also a little scary and a little complicated to be thinking so far down the line. Is there an easy way to get started while also considering the longer term implications?
Yeah, and because we love doing this, we thought about that. And so usually when projects are really hard, there is no true shortcut. But because we do this for so many clients, we're starting to see these really great patterns. And so we can see these patterns in the data. And so one of the great ways that we can do that is through our starter packs. So we've looked at all this data and said, what are these most common metrics that we see our private equity clients using? What do we see across these different patterns? And how can we pull that together and make recommendations for our clients that are coming onto platform? So what's great about our starter packs is that we've truly vetted from a number of different places. So what's most common? What can we benchmark against? And what is the industry calling for right now? So what that means is that we've got these like prefabricated sets of metrics that we can go to someone and say, hey, we've thought about these questions. This is what's going on in your industry right now. And here's where we can get started. So we do oftentimes like to start with something that's going to be really manageable for those that haven't collected before. You don't want to start with a framework that's going to be 85 or 100 metrics. We really want to see that number lower than 40. And so that's a conversation that we have with lots of folks to say, hey, let's knock that down a little bit. Let's really think about what needs to be at focus here and what we can maybe push off. And from there, we can really start to get going. We really want to see that momentum, and really we want to see data providers having a super strong experience. And so that's something that we're constantly seeing in focus. We want our users to have a good experience, not just on our GPs and our data requester side, but also from that perspective of the data providers.
What if a metric that's really important to me and my company and my strategy is not included in that starter pack?
Well, come on down, because we have ways of doing that too. So we support a truly strong library. It grows every day. It grows every quarter, sitting just under about 800 right now. Yeah, just shy of 800. But we have custom metric capabilities. And so what that means is that we can help draft anything that you'd like to see. Oftentimes that will come with the coaching to say, okay, when you're thinking about writing a metric in this way, it should look like this. We want to frame it in this way, or let's shape the guidance out so that we can really get to that form of data input. But anything that you can think of, we really can put in platform in a way that's going to matter for you. We can make recommendations. We can shape that on the way. I'm a big believer in standard-centric metrics and making sure that those metrics are going to come from truly a standards originating body. But we can point you in all kinds of directions from all kinds of sources. But at the end of the day, if that's a metric that matters to you, we can help get that on the platform.
Thanks. Jesse, over to you. I've done the work. I've set up my frameworks. I'm heading into my second year of collecting data on the Novata platform. Do I need to do anything to review or refine my data strategy?
No, you're all good. One and done. Great job. We told you we'd make ESG easy. No. So yes, you have actually just begun the hard work. So we ask folks that have been collecting data, or we guide them or advise them to look at two things: process and performance. And those are really the two things that are going to drive the quality and fill rates of your data, but also what's going to enable you to actually use the data over time. So when we talk about performance or process metrics, or when we talk about reviewing your process, like, okay, what were your problem metrics in terms of fill rates? What were the metrics that really were easy seemingly for your data providers to fill? And what lessons learned from your good fill rates can you apply to your low fill rates? And that can be anything from going back to Caitlin's team and maybe revising some of your metrics, maybe shortening your metric list a little bit, maybe rephrasing them, maybe offering a little bit of support to your data providers on those sticky ones, finding out, asking them directly, why was this one difficult for you to complete? Things like that. But we would also recommend that you do the same thing for performance. So process is making sure that you get the data and you get the quality of data that you need to drive performance. And so we really want people to be moving from process, get your infrastructure, get your muscle memory in place, get those portcos trained and bought in on this process of data collection, because it's not always easy, right? And then move to performance. So once you've got the skeleton there and you can start building things out. I'm still celebrating Halloween, by the way. So once you get your skeleton there, you can start building it out and start moving towards performance. So where can you start moving from questions around policies to questions around improvements? Like, what are you actually doing on the ground to drive business value through your ESG topics? So that's kind of the nutshell version of what we advise on. Shoring up your processes, but really always aiming to move from process to performance. So tying that back to a little bit of what Caitlin said and what you said, Meredith, about what if this all just feels too big and scary? How can we start in a way that's easy? Get your processes in place, because collecting data isn't easy, and it's going to involve multiple functions across the business, right? And one of the ways that you can get some buy-in and improve that quality is making sure that your portcos understand why this is important. And that ties back to good metrics. They should look at a metric and see, okay, I can understand why somebody would ask me this, but ideally they'll say, oh, I can see how this might actually drive some measurable business outcomes over time. So I actually feel like I've got some skin in the game. I want to know this data and I want to be watching this year over year. So moving from process to performance and really starting to get that buy-in from your portcos and empowering them to see the data as theirs, not something that they're just being asked to provide to you.
Thanks. You touched on a couple of topics that I want to come back to: working across your companies with this data and strategy, working with your portcos. But first, I want to ask, I know we're talking specifically about ESG data, non-financial data, but how should we be thinking about this data set in alignment to our financial data?
Yes. So that again goes back to metric selection. This is going to be a recurring theme today. You're going to hear us continue going back to metric selection, refining your metrics list and aligning your data with your strategy and coming up with an actual data strategy. So ideally you have grounded your metrics list in financial materiality. So you're going to want to be asking questions, of course, like those top level questions around, do you have these policies in place? But you also want to have an understanding of which metrics are actually financially material to your portcos based on their industry. If you don't have a grasp on that, that's great. We can help you do that. We love to help you do that, because in a perfect world, you're all considering this data alongside your financial data, right? So that's where we want to set you up, is so you are looking at the metrics that actually contribute to performance and can eventually, over time, as you improve your programs and as you increase the rigor around your data, can actually contribute to some financial models.
Great. Okay, so yes, I think we are going to talk about how critical selecting the right metrics, the metrics that matter, are to the strategy. But collecting that data from portfolio companies is another part of the puzzle, right? So we know that data quality is essential for benchmarking and using ESG data effectively for decision-making, risk management, value optimization, et cetera. And we also know from a research report that we recently published with Oliver Wyman that data collection is perceived as a real challenge in the industry. So Caitlin or Jesse, I'll leave it up to you who wants to start, but what are some best practices for ensuring that the data we collect from our portfolio companies is complete and high quality?
Should I start? Yeah. So part of this falls into my domain because it's something that we think about all the time. So of course, as I mentioned, we're thinking about the user experience. I think that is something that really differentiates us, because you'll find that not only does our guidance stand out, but also our CS capabilities do as well. You'll find lots of folks always online and guiding people through this process. But in terms of ensuring that data is going to be complete and a high quality, there's certain different parameters and even guardrails we can put in place to make sure that's possible. So for example, we actually do call them guardrails. So if we're looking for a number that's going to be a percentage, and we know that percentage is going to be between 0 and 100, we're going to make sure you can't put in a number that's going to be bigger than that. And so we've thought through all of these things in combination with our team of data scientists, where we know what that's going to look like and we know what information we could and should expect. And so that helps us inform our clients that when they're going through, and if they've done their calculation and they put in a number that's higher, it's going to be flagged and they can't actually submit it. And so that's one way that we've thought through, okay, we actually want to ensure that data quality is going to stay within a certain range. We're going to keep that quality really high. So we can do that through our tech-enabled platform. That's literally how it's going to function. And then the other way we want to make sure it's complete and that that quality is going to stay high is really just through that guidance on the platform. So it really just isn't just the submission page you're going to see, but it's also that guidance. We're going to provide options like context for answer. So there's always going to be a space where portcos can go in there and write in and say, hey, this is how I got here, or this is the supporting document, or this is that file where I pulled this from. And what our data science team will do, because they are super skilled at their jobs, is they'll look through that. And if there's anything that's going to flag, they'll flag to us. And so if CS has to go back to someone and say, hey, we're seeing something out of range here, we oftentimes will go back and work with clients because data quality is something that is a really big concern. And so when we think about that, again, from that larger perspective, we want to ensure that as that data is getting rolled up or it's going into benchmarks, that data is absolutely at the highest standard that we can provide. So I think from that end, we've done everything we can from that platform perspective to ensure that that data quality is going to meet those highest marks and be that kind of best in class marker.
I'm glad that you covered the platform side of things. And I swear this wasn't scripted because I'm going to cover the human side of things. So a lot of this goes back to how you present this to your portcos, right? And you're going to hear us talk about buy-in, I think, a lot today from a number of different angles. But if it's meaningful to them, they will do a better job. It's really as simple as that, right? So if your portcos understand the utility of the data, if they feel like it's theirs, it's something that they're going to get some value out of, they don't feel like this is something that is being asked of them and is not actually going to deliver a return to them, you see a very different approach to it and a very different level of engagement. So there's a lot of work to be done on the GP side in terms of communicating the why. I mean, in an ideal world, for every single metric that you are asking your portcos of, you should have a really good and compelling answer for why in the event that they ask you, why are you asking for this? And it should be more than, well, it's part of this framework or someone else asked for it, right? Like there should be some additional translation of value there. Well, this is important, or this is part of this framework because this, XYZ, you should know the answers to those questions, right? So help your portcos understand why this is important and help them understand why it's important to their business specifically. How, not every ESG metric is going to drive business value. Like I in no way and trying to spread that message that's fundamentally not true, but many of them will. So it's good to have a handle of which ones will, which ones won't, and why both can be important to a broader strategy. So make it meaningful to your portcos, communicate about it, let them know why they're doing it, why you're asking, what they can do with it. And you will see a much different approach to filling in the questionnaires than folks who don't see it as valuable to the business and waited till the last minute to do it.
Thanks, Jessie and Caitlin. I really like that approach of both a tech-enabled quality assurance check for organizations, as well as embedding the conversation and the value in terms of the human relationship between investor and company. I think those are both really important sides of the coin to make sure that ESG is adopted across the value chain. Before I jump into the conversation on buy-in and ESG across an organization, we did have a question from one of our audience members that I wanted to address, since it really speaks to the selecting the right metrics philosophy that we've been talking about. So the question is from Andrew, and it's, what is our approach, or what is Novata's approach to collecting and aggregating ESG data that doesn't necessarily use the same metric, recognizing that small private companies often track ESG metrics in different ways and may not be able to conform to a standard data point request? Caitlin, I think this one is for you.
Yeah. I think there's two things I'll say about this, and something I'm known for just obviously repeating the same phrases over and over again. But one is that close enough isn't good enough. And so I'm a real stickler when it comes to data quality control. And I know it's something that the data scientists also agree with, because when we see competing guidance come from different standards that seems like it's the same metric, but maybe it's not quite, we run a real risk, and we run a real risk of aggregating together that hasn't been derived in the same way. So if that time period has been altered, if the calculations differ, if in any way they're a little bit off, we run the risk of changing or diluting that data set, which then we pull benchmarks from or reporting back to portcos. So we're super, super careful. And so I think some examples of that, we've got a ton of super popular benchmarks on our platform that we're extremely careful about this with. And one of those would be unadjusted gender pay gap. And so the process through which you arrive at a metric like unadjusted gender pay gap is actually pretty complex. And so we work through that constantly. I think even within the last 6 months, we've adjusted that time and again, and we're constantly adding resources to it because we want to make sure that guidance is going to match exactly what those standards and even the EEOC calls for, because we want definitionally, we want it to be as bang on as we possibly can and leave kind of no margin for error. So when those things don't match, if it's close enough, it's not going to be good enough in terms of merging those metrics. And so we keep really tight standards. And what will happen, unfortunately, is that we'll see metrics proliferate if they don't match and meet that standard. I think coming from my perspective, which is one of a data scientist, is that we can't be putting these things together if they're close enough. So what we'll do when we're looking at, say, a historical framework or historical data upload, we'll say, hey, this is what we're seeing, going on in the sector or going on with other standards. This is what we could recommend should you want to map against that in the future. And so we can make that recommendation before, something gets out of line or you want to make that switch now. We do see that quite a lot, that folks will take our recommendation and make that move. And then I think the other half of that is that we are looking at ways that we can incorporate guidance when it does come from standards that might want to use the very similar guidance, but maybe they use it in different ways. I think we're not yet at a point where people can universally point to definitions across the board. I think the one thing that we see constant across everything is greenhouse gas protocol, that everyone from CSRD to GRI, everyone is looking at greenhouse gas protocol to set the standard there. Nowhere else, definitely not in social metrics, are we yet seeing that kind of convergence. So that's something we keep an eye out. We're looking for someone to really set that bar, but right now there's a little bit too much divergence for us to be completely confident with that. So it's something that I would say it's my job to keep a good finger on the pulse in terms of where that's going and to make recommendations on what kind of changes and tweaks we can make. But from, again, that data science perspective, we're super tight on what can and can't be aggregated and where and how we draw those lines.
But Caitlin, just to dive into that a little bit more, that doesn't prevent a company from collecting the data that they want to collect on our platform.
Of
correct?
Course.
There's other channels. Could you just talk about
definitely.
that
And absolutely.
quickly?
In terms of custom metrics, we see it all the time. I think another example is sometimes we see folks, even other organizations, that say, hey, no, we want to collect the percentage is the way that we want to go, and we calculate it in this way. We actually want to see net new hires calculated this way, and we know that that's different from the way that the standard does it. However, that's our definition. And so what we'll do instead is just mark that off, and that's going to be a custom metric, and that's totally fine. We support anyone collecting anything in any which way. However, what that often means is that we don't have a large enough pool to create that benchmark from. So with everything, they're just trade-offs. And so we're trying to gauge for folks, okay, if you want to have a benchmark that's been normalized against this industry, against this geography, this is what that means for you. If you want to continue and measure in this direction, which comes from a smaller pool, we're not going to see it hitting those levels. This is what that trade-off is. So there's the way we can collect absolutely anything. If there's a way to evaluate anything, I could evaluate the effectiveness of this webinar. We could absolutely do it. It just depends, what trade-offs do you want to make, and where and when and how do you want to make them? And so we're constantly making those trade-offs. So do you want to have that 65 metric framework and risk some of those drop-off rates? Or do we want to condense that and really go heavy on standards because we want to keep fill rates super high. So that's just kind of the constant trade-off that we help our clients think through. And it's constantly, you can kind of see the loop right here on screen, that it's going between data strategy and metric selection, where we're trying to weight those priorities and make sure that all our clients at the end of the day are having those needs met. So of course we can collect anything that folks need to see. We're just trying to help steer them towards those priorities and make sure at the end of the day that they're collecting what they need.
Thank you. Thank you. I like that you just connected your two teams and how you help work with clients in such an effective way. I think there's a really good analogy there with ESG at the companies that we work with, because I have heard, and I'm sure everyone on this call has heard, someone say that ESG is described as a team sport within an organization. Jesse, let me kick it back over to you. How does that analogy resonate with you, and how are you seeing firms align around ESG within their internal organizations?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I would say the person that says ESG is a team sport is in the lucky few, right? That's the ideal. That is the ideal situation. I think that's what we all need to be striving for. And I think as companies move a little bit further into their data strategy and collaborate across functions and across organizations, even to collect their data and understand how it touches every function of the business, that's where we're going to end up. That's where we're going to have to end up for businesses that really want to drive value through their ESG programs. I would say, though, again, that's some bright, shiny future we're not at yet. I mean, I think the reality is there's been a big push to hire a head of ESG or a head of sustainability, and that's across markets. It's across capital markets. It's at individual firm or individual companies. It's been a big push, and I think that's been great, except where it's been viewed as a box ticking exercise. And I think we encounter a lot of people who feel siloed, which is, of course, the opposite of ESG as a team sport. We see that there is not often enough buy-in and senior level backing of these people to actually spread the work across the organization. So I think, yes, it has to be a team sport. I don't think we're seeing enough of that yet. I think I think you'd be hard pressed to find a function in a business that isn't touched by ESG data or the performance issues that are captured by ESG data. But I think you'd be equally challenged to find a head of ESG who doesn't feel lonely and frustrated. It's a difficult job that I think in a lot of organizations is kind of still in that, ooh, what do we do with this kind of stage of maturity? So 100%, it is a team sport. It needs to be a team sport. We're not there yet in terms of how most firms have set the role up.
So how can a head of ESG or a person working on ESG, maybe unfortunately off the side of their desk, get more out of their program and strategy with those minimal or really limited resources?
Yeah, for better or worse, I'm not sure how many folks moving into this role understood the level of stakeholder engagement that was going to be required to get the program off the ground, but that's the hard truth of the job, right? I think that's the hard truth of a lot of cross-functional or interdisciplinary roles. So I think most people coming from a sustainability or ESG background probably saw that coming when they took the job or when they like actively ran toward the role, right? But yeah, there's just a lot of stakeholder engagement that needs to be done. And I think that you could actually liken it to what we need to see data requesters doing for their data providers, making the work meaningful to them, right? So as much as every head of ESG or head of sustainability would love to just hit the ground running with a great strategy and start collecting the data and translating it into performance insights, you can't boil the ocean, right? So you have to kind of bite off manageable chunks. You need to do some power mapping, understand who you need to get behind you and how, what's going to be meaningful to them, what's going to be meaningful to their business function. You go back to Caitlin's idea, which I guess is my idea, according to Caitlin, is the looking far out. We don't even know whose ideas are whose anymore. That's how integrated the teams are here. But no, you look far out into what do I want to be able to say and do at what point in time, and how do I need to back things up? And you start, you get a less exciting picture, but that's the work that needs to be done. You need to take those kind of roll up your sleeves and almost like campaigning type work around the organization to make it meaningful to everybody that you need to get on board. But I also firmly believe that that's what drives a good strategy, in the same way that a GP collecting financially material metrics makes the work meaningful to the portco. It's also the best strategy for the GP, right? So if you as a head of ESG are thinking about how to make this meaningful across the business, then by default, I think you're actually developing a much better strategy and one that's more aligned with business objectives. So yes, look into the future at the big shiny picture, rein it in, and focus your very scarce time and resources on those few manageable steps, and the work that's going to feel meaningful across functions.
So that's the work the head of ESG has to do. What do we say about the role senior leadership needs to play in empowering ESG teams?
Yes. So for as much on the ground work as there is by the head of ESG, there definitely needs to be that backstop from senior leadership, right? You need to empower these people. And the best way to empower them is to just literally have their back. We have hired you for your expertise. We trust you to do this. We know that you're going to develop a strategy that is business aligned, both for the firm and for our portfolio companies. Have that trust in that person, or maybe you didn't hire the right person if you don't have that trust in them, right? Like, have that confidence, have that trust, and stand behind them. So when they're out there doing the hard work of getting the buy-in, they need that message to be coming from the top as well. It really does need to come from both sources. It can't be just one.
Caitlin, anything to add on that?
Yeah, we certainly see kind of this wave, right, of new hires in ESG, heads of ESG, of sustainability, chief sustainability officers coming into the space. And as great a step it is, we also need to see empowered ESG leaders. And it's such a weird time that we're living through, in that we're all living through a period of collective climate grief in a way that I didn't intend to be living through that period in my 30s. And here we are, kind of thing. And so it's a weird time. I mean, I love that I'm here at Novata and that we're affecting this with one of the societal's biggest levers of change, in terms of private markets. And so at the same time, it's empowering, but also I feel the pressure, I think, as we all do, to invest in these changes and to make them now, because it already feels like it's too late. And so, not to be the doomsday naysayer, but there's certainly the power in taking action and doing it. And so it's as awesome as it is to see all those job boards filling up with all these spots, and we see the titles coming into our meetings, having them empowered with not just the budgets, but the ability to act on those decisions is certainly the next step, in that positive direction.
Great, thank you. So we've covered the need to get buy-in, the need to work across your organization and create stakeholder value within your organization, as well as communicate value out to the portfolio companies. Hopefully this is being driven from a top-down strategy that executives are incredibly engaged with as well, and selecting the right metrics that really articulate the strategy that everyone is trying to achieve. A lot of steps there, and I want to go back to sort of maybe some of the basics just to make sure that we tick those off in this webinar. So one of the things, Caitlin, that you spoke about at the top of the hour and have continued to reiterate is that selecting the right metrics is important. Understanding which metrics align to industry frameworks is very helpful for benchmarking and for data quality, and being able to understand performance relative to peers or industries or other investment strategies companies might be interested in. Obviously, you can do custom metrics as well. But when we're thinking about those industry frameworks, can you just give us sort of a high level example of the difference between frameworks, creating metrics against frameworks, metrics against standards, and metrics against regulations? And what do we need to think about there?
That is a really good question. And it is something we see all the time. And I think it's really easy to throw your hands up and be like, one of the many articles we've seen in HBR and elsewhere that are like, alphabet soup, everybody's making a big mess of this. And to some extent, standards organizations have not really helped, but I will say they are trying to get better. And I do believe that it will get better. We're seeing some convergence around some of these organizations. I'll tell you a little bit about how I think about them and how we as an organization think about them and how we separate them out, because I think it has helped that we're not just kind of lumping them together in kind of one big sentence and just kind of putting a couple commas in there. We are delineating what each of those things are. And for us, it does matter how we approach that as metrics. And then eventually for our users, it will differentiate how they work with each of those metrics and each of those metric types on platform. So for us, a standard is going to be this like really specific quality requirement for reporting. And you're going to see that from like a major standard setting organization, like a GRI, SASB, a greenhouse gas protocol. That's going to be like real standard practice. And that's why we call them standards. It's going to come from those bodies, and GRI and SASB themselves have a ton of interoperability. And there's been a lot written to both of those organizations. And so that's why when we're going to defer to true standard setting bodies, it's going to be those two. In terms of frameworks, we think of those as really more broader contextual frames for information that you're going to hang those metrics off of. So more principles for providing, and you're going to see guidance here, more directional pieces of information. And so here you might see something like CDP, Climate Disclosure Project, or like a TCFD, although towing the line because regulation in some countries, framework elsewhere, but it's one of our most popular right now and something we're putting a ton of time, energy, attention, and effort into because TCFD, we're definitely getting tons of uptake. Regulation, one of our biggest focus. I say this, we have a ton of focuses right now, but regulation is certainly it. CSRD getting tons of focus, CS-DDD, EU taxonomy. If it's got letters in front of it, like you can believe that my team has heard about it and it's something that we talk about on the regular. This is really going to come from a regulation. It's legal, it's compulsory, it's policy to the point of being quite binding. And so regulations coming out of California related to Climate Related Disclosures Act, so 251, 263, 54 related to VCs and diversity related disclosures. All of those are going to be part and parcel of what we call regulations. And so taking a step back from all of those, when we think about how metrics fit into something like regulations, we're trying to set up our users in a way that we can break down each piece of that regulation into that level of the data input. So we think about something as broad as a disclosure, and we want to guide our clients every step of the way, that we're going to have a ton of narrative pieces there. There's going to be a lot of open-ended and qualitative entries that are going to fit in there. And so for each point, we want to walk our clients through that. And so you might not see tons of quantitative metrics, but it really is going to be structured. And we're going to guide you towards what needs to be disclosed in order to meet the letter of the law as per these regulators, whether they're e-fragging coming out of the EU, whether it's the state of California, or what we'll see probably within the next 2 years coming out of the US SEC. So for all of these, there are differentiating points. There are different ways that we treat the metrics, how we label the metrics, how they fit within our own kind of naming structure and within our platform. And so I think the most important thing to remember here is that someone, it's me, thinks about this all day long. We think about how it's going to work, what it's going to look like, how it's going to interact with our platform. And then Jesse and I together spend all of our time thinking about how we're going to work between services and metrics to bring that to life for our clients. So really this kind of end-to-end experience where you don't have to worry about what exactly each piece of the regulation is going to look like, but how is it going to matter to you? How are these metrics going to be spelled out? And how can we both work together to really make sure that you're fully supported on that end-to-end reporting journey, no matter if it's standard you're reporting against, a framework, a custom framework filled with custom metrics, or a regulation. So for all of these needs, for all of these purposes, we've got you covered.
Thank you. I think that was really helpful to understand how you're working within the platform, within the metrics to make sure that our clients are enabled to meet whatever regulation is relevant or important to their organization. Jesse, I'm going to put the last question to you. Can you just talk a little bit about how companies should start to think about these regulations before they start to collect the data and before they start to put it into the system aligned to the process and workflows that Caitlin and her team are developing? How should companies start to think about tackling regulations and working within their organization to make sure that they have the data and the mindset to accomplish what needs to be collected to meet those obligations?
Now is how they should start thinking about it. So, it's really easy to, I think, particularly in the US, right? Because we have been affected by much less regulation around ESG, but we're seeing it starting to bubble up. A couple examples that Caitlin just mentioned coming out of California, potentially some at the federal level. We know that many states tend to follow what California has done in terms of legislation. So you can't be thinking about it too soon because it's not easy to do. And so you want to be prepared long before your actual compulsory date. I think the example that's hot on everyone's minds right now and that we're spending a lot of our time thinking about and preparing for and helping our clients prepare for is CSRD. So there are these phased timelines for when companies need to report. We want GPs to be aware now of when their portfolio companies are going to be required to report and on what, at least some general idea out of the gates of what they will need to be reporting on. This is something that we are offering all of our GPs. We're helping them understand this about their own portfolios and spreading the message. Get ready now. Do not wait. So based on the size or the operations of your portcos, perhaps you think you can wait until 2025 or 2026. You cannot. You really need to start moving now. So that is my biggest piece of advice is don't wait until it's banging down your door. Get ready now because these are difficult things to do. You know, they're labor intensive. They're detail oriented. Compulsory versus elective is a very different game when it comes to data collection and disclosure. Some of this data, especially in the case of CSRD, it needs to be assured. Some of the carbon data as well. So you can't prepare too soon. So start getting back to my earlier comment about getting your skeletons in place. Start getting the infrastructure and the processes in place. Do some pilot collection. Just get ready now. Don't wait, or you will be in a painful position when it is banging down your door.
Great. Thank you. I think we're going to end there. I just want to recap what I heard for everyone. My quick takeaways from this conversation with you, Caitlin and Jesse, is that it is the metrics that matter. You need to understand what you need to collect. You need to make it important to your firm, to your internal stakeholders, get buy-in for it, as well as make it important to your portfolio companies so they understand why you're asking to collect on it. And now is the time to get started. Whatever your objectives are for your ESG and sustainability strategy, now is the time to get started. And to enable that, I'd like to leave everyone on this call with two resources. One, I'd encourage you to visit the ebook section of Novata.com and download our 2023 ESG metrics guide. In there, we share the ESG metrics that have been most requested by GPs and the top 10 metrics requested across each pillar: environmental, social, and governance. This will give you a great insight into some of those concepts Caitlin was talking about with starter packs or ways to get going, thinking about the metrics that can really be clearly benchmarked across either the industry or the focus area that you and your investment strategy are focused on. And then I'd also like to invite you all to join us at our December 7th webinar, when we'll be examining ESG and sustainability trends for 2024. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn channel and your email for registration details on that event. It's coming soon. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Jesse and Caitlin, for sharing your expertise with us. If you'd like to learn more about Novata or need resources to help with defining or refining your strategy, please visit our website at novata.com or reach out to us directly. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Meredith. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.